Good morning and happy Sunday. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene. Hello, Zoom friends. We are so glad you are with us today. My name is Heidi Gould. My pronouns are she, her. I have short silver hair and glasses, and I'm wearing a pink sweater with the pastel worship associate stole today. And I am this morning's worship associate. All the information you need to know about today's service can be found in our handy guide to Sunday service that our ushers will pass out. If you raise your hand, if you're interested in having a handy guide, our ushers will be available to pass them out. Ushers, I did just ask. But keep your hand raised if you would like a handy dandy guide, and they will get passed out. Thank you. Zoom friends, our tech team will drop a copy of the order of service and a visitor form in the chat. For those who are with us here in the sanctuary, there will be a time later in our service to silently honor the joys and sorrows by lighting a candle or dropping a stone in water. Our ministerial team, Ember, is with us online as the Zoom chaplain. Those in the room are also welcome to offer words you wish to be shared in the book located on the south wall of the sanctuary. Zoom folks, you will have an opportunity to include things they want spoken in the chat. And now, let us enter our time of worship by lighting the flaming chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. Kieran will be coming up with Ryan, maybe. Kieran, there you are. To light our chalice. Thank you, Kieran and Mom. And they will be lighting the chalice as we share the words from
Jalal al-Din Rumi. Don't worry about saving these songs. And if one of our instruments breaks, it doesn't matter.
We have fallen into the place where everything is music.
The strumming and the flute notes rise into the atmosphere, and even if the whole world's harps should burn up, there will be hidden instruments playing.
So the candle flickers and goes out. We have a piece of flint and a spark.
In this spirit of ongoing renewal, we rekindle our chalice flame.
And now, let us say the shared words of our mission. Empowered by love, we transform ourselves and share our world.
I'm the Reverend Dennis Reynolds, and it is such a joy to be here in this congregation that launched me into ministry. I use the pronouns he and him. I'm a tallish, getting wider and grayer and a little thinner on top, older white male with a beard. And today I'm wearing a kind of tan-colored sports coat, and I would describe the color of my clerical stole as sort of a, what did we say, lavender, I think is how we would label this color. I'll talk a little more about that a little later this morning. I also do want to honor Topher Payne, who is the author of the rewrite of Shel Silverstein's classic book. You can find it online. It's titled The Tree with Appropriate Boundaries. I came to a place that I called the other book the codependent tree. And Topher Payne offered us a very different, much healthier model of how we may give. It's an interesting time we've come to as a nation, as a culture, and impacts that are spreading globally. Tomorrow will be a day that lifts up two contrasting celebrations. First is Martin Luther Day King celebration, and concurrently, the inauguration of Donald Trump as President of the United States. I can hardly imagine two more different personages and alternate models of how one might be in the world. Yet here we are. Here we are. Here we are together in beloved community. I'm so very glad we're here with each other in times like these. I'd like to invite us into our shared worship with words from one of my most favorite seminary teachers, the Reverend Dr. Mark Morrison Reed, with whom I took a mind and heart-expanding class called African Americans in Unitarianism, in Universalism, and in Unitarian Universalism. Reverend Mark wrote, "The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. That bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is the church that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens and our strength is renewed. Together." I want to offer deep gratitude for all for taking time to be present, with what is moving in so many's lives in this time. We need to take time. We need to pause, and we'll share more about that later. The reading which I've asked Heidi to share this morning is by Monica Coleman. In the reading, Coleman references a particular worldview called postmodern womanist theology. Do not worry if you do not know what that is. I will share more about it later. Just know it is a particular perspective that I trust you will find instructive and inspiring. Heidi.
Not all evil in the world can be overcome, and yet a postmodern feminist theology maintains hope in the struggle to creatively and constructively respond to it. Sometimes feelings of discord are the results of conflicts in the world. Sometimes liberation is not possible, but survival and quality of life are. All-encompassing health, wholeness, unity, and salvation are never fully attained in the world. As we are constantly becoming, we are constantly vulnerable to evil, and we are constantly capable of overcoming it. In postmodern womanist theology, salvation is an activity. Each new moment brings possibilities in both directions, for good or for evil. A postmodern womanist theology strives for tangible representation of the good. The good includes justice, equality, discipleship, quality of life, acceptance, and inclusion.
Fires are raging in Southern California, and political firestorms are on the horizon in Washington, D.C. I view both of these unfolding stories with pain and trepidation, and I seek a narrative, some examples, perhaps some exemplars who might offer answers to the questions I asked. How do I cope? How do I respond? How do we cope? How do we respond? How might we together respond? In the face of the realities unfolding in the world, I ask myself, who or what do I want to be? As I get older, I sometimes replace that with the phrase of, what kind of ancestor do I want to be? What stories will be told about me? In addition to the stories about fires and firestorms, the recent news offered an exemplary version of what kind of person I would like to strive to be. The accounts of the life of the late President Jimmy Carter, who for a century lifted up integrity, service, and faith as central to leading a good life, offers us an inspirational story. His is a story worth telling again and again and again. Tomorrow we will be lifting up another exemplary ancestor, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, his striving for the greater good has much in common with the theology of postmodern womanism that we read in today's reading. In addition to pondering the guidance these exemplars might offer, I've been doing a different kind of exploration of options as to how I might shape and reshape my own life story. A guidebook I have been exploring is titled Rest is Resistance, a Manifesto by Tricia Hersey. Yes, you heard me correctly. Rest is resistance. It was recommended to me by a Unitarian Universalist ministerial colleague. I encountered the reading that we shared this morning in that book. Hersey, like Monica Coleman, is a postmodern womanist theologian. Before I explore Hersey's notions further and how her views on resisting what she calls grind culture are beginning to slowly alter my own continually unfolding story, I want to provide some theological context. As many of you know, I took a deep dive a number of years back into theology when I sought my Master's of Divinity degree at Meadville Lombard Theological School. I got to admit, when I first read the name of the school, I was a bit intimidated by theological school. I just wanted to be a minister, not necessarily a theologian. Did I have to go to theological school? Well, the answer in those times, if I wanted to do it mostly from a distance, was Meadville Lombard was the UU option available to me, and at that time, the only one. So I did find it intimidating, but I'm not the only one who stepped into that. Ember, our ministerial intern and today's online chaplain, is currently a student at Meadville Lombard Theological School. We shared some comments yesterday about a theology professor who I encountered who's still teaching there now, Reverend Dr. Michael Hogue, and Michael Hogue, I used to describe in Michael's classes, if he had used one more syllable, he would have lost me. Amber chuckled knowing about what I spoke. So, to help me connect to the striving and growing I did in seminary, I wore a talisman. It's this stole. People ask me about the symbol. This stool was a gift to me from my classmates in my cohort at Meadville. Each of us in that cohort got the same stool. And the symbol on this side is what used to be the symbol for Meadville Lombard. And the other side is something more familiar to many of you. It's a chalice. Well, it helps me feel like a theologian when I wear this one. At Meadville, we studied theology and explored things like postmodern feminist theology. Sometimes these explorations made my brain ache, especially in my Cogs class, because I thought so hard. It was good for me, though. Some threads from that learning are woven in to how I now view the world. Before I explore further the way such a theology in Hersey's works might offer inspiration and guidance for our own theological understandings and our lives, I feel the need to contextualize this theological exploration and define a few terms. To do that, I want to begin with an exploration of what postmodern womanist theology is, or at least offer up this white man's view of how I understand and how it might offer insights that shape my own theological understandings and might offer some viewpoints that shapes your own and who you strive to be. So let's explore a little bit that label, postmodern womanist theology. As a kind of disclaimer, I want to repeat again, these are my views and others may explain it differently. The first term is theology, which means literally, if we go back to the Greeks, the study of God, theos, or divinity. I define it as a study or deep exploration, both externally and internally, of what we find holy, however we might name it. Theology is not simply the story of God as it is used in the Judeo-Christian traditions, but it is a much broader and more exploratory process. Meanwhile, postmodern theology, which emerged late in the 20th century, one definition that makes sense to me is that it is a theology that asserts that our hope does not rest outside of this world, that rests in this world rather than a world beyond, here and now. Hope is in change, not in exchange. The focus of such a theology is on transformation. Sounds kind of familiar, huh? The theology classes I took at Meadville Lombard included process theology, which explores an interactive process between humanity and so-called divinity. I also took a humanist theology course that explored religious, human-centered expressions of a power or powers that we find greater than ourselves. Such a force has no need for a divine being or expressions of the supernatural. One form of humanist theology that is closely attuned with my own continually evolving views is labeled religious naturalism, which I summarize as seeing the world as so super, as so amazing, I have no need for something called supernatural. The natural is super enough to bring me to a sense of overwhelming awe and reverence. I also took a global theology, and it was therein that I was introduced to liberation theologies, including womanist theology. One text from a liberationist perspective that I remember from this class is one titled Longing for Running Water, Ecofeminism and Liberation by Yvonne Gabarra. That insightful exploration of meaning, written by a Brazilian Catholic nun, was my first deep diving into theologies that emerge from life experiences and worldviews very, very different from my own. When I discovered in my own way, from reading Gebara and with a bit of internal translating, both from her ecofeminist perspective and her Catholic tradition. Took some rewriting within my own head, but when I understood it better, it was a framing that I found deeply moving and transformative. I have found that notions and expressions from different perspectives challenge the Eurocentric, white supremacist, and patriarchal notions that are often dominant in our culture, and which had, without my knowing, been embedded in my own thinking. Listening to these different voices offered lessons that resonated deeply within and shifted my sense of who and what I want to be. They helped me in my striving to be liberated from a culturally imposed, narrow, restrictive worldview. As some of you know, liberation theologies, especially the notion of expression of one's deepest beliefs through action, emerged in the 20th century from Catholic priests serving in Latin America, who affirmed, like Monica Coleman, that a meaningful theological framework is one that strives for tangible representations of the good, and that the good includes justice, equality, discipleship, quality of life, acceptance, and inclusion. When I review that womanist list of what is the good, I am struck by how similar it is to the values affirmed in the newly adopted expression of Unitarian Universalist theologies that are now Article 2 of our association's bylaws, the official expression of our most deeply held aspirations. It has love at the center, and it lives up justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, independence, and generosity as our shared core values. Unitarian Universalism, our non-creedal faith, emphasizes the importance of what we do as being more important than civilly giving voice to what we believe. In theological terms, we would say our orthopraxis, how we live our faith, what Buddhists might call right actions, is of primary importance. Deed, not creed, we UUs sometimes say. Now, the very creedal Catholic priests who put liberation theology into action would agree with those of us UUs who affirm that true faith needs to be expressed not just as belief, as orthodoxy, but through deed as orthopraxy. Because in such a theological frame, what you do is a manifestation of your belief. Jimmy Carter is certainly an exemplary example of that, as is the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. To many Latin American Catholics, that commitment meant standing up for the poor and oppressed, even if it meant being in conflict with governments and other secular power structures. The most dramatic 20th century example of such activism by many in the church was that led to the brutal assassination of Archbishop Oscar Romero by government aligned forces in El Salvador back in 1980. By the way, the current Pope, Pope Francis, is also a Latin American Catholic, although he would not label himself as a liberation theologian. It's certainly been influenced by such a theology. In the United States, liberation theologies influenced those who began to articulate a Black liberationist theology and a womanist theology. Womanist theology emerged from Black women who in their own life experience have lived with the reality of continuing marginalization, both because of their gender and their race. Though it is a theology that arises from life experiences that are very different from my own lived experience as a privileged white man, I can and do learn powerful lessons from their stories. And I'm inspired to strive for the good and to support where I can from my own identity's efforts to dismantle notions of white supremacy and patriarchy that have for too long been justified, or in which folks like me have been complicit within the continuing systems of oppression. When I think back to the then surprising elections of 2016, when Donald Trump was first elected, and how shocked we were, I reflected on, at that time, not only was the United States of America not ready to elect a woman as president, but at that point in time, the Unitarian Universalist Association had not yet elected a woman as president of our own association. We've now done so twice. And our current president, Sophia Betancourt, is a Black, lesbian, postmodern womanist theologian. She was on the theology faculty. Yes, all right. And, progress has been made, folks. In the midst of dark times, we look to the light of that chalice, right? We have made progress in our movement, progress that I hold on to faith when I look at the words of postmodern womanist theologians that help sustain me. In Tricia Hersey's book, Rest is Resistance, she affirms that what she labels grind culture has oppressed all workers, but most dramatically Black women who have been relegated by a white supremacist patriarchy to the most servile of roles. Grind culture is a capitalist system affirming narrative that tells us that working harder is a path. Or as expressed in the fundamentalist Christian church of my childhood, the path to salvation. Hersey shares the lessons she has learned from her ancestors and her own lived experience, and she offers a wisdom that's a benefit to us all. There is an old adage that says that few of us, if we were on our deathbed reviewing our life, would say, boy, if only I'd spent more time at work. Right? Because the reality comes to mind for me in the adage of that old song lyric, work your fingers to the bone. What do you get? Bony finger. Yet we are taught that working harder will offer us the greatest rewards. And even for those of us who are privileged to be well compensated, more work only gets us more stuff as we become more embedded in our consumer-driven capitalist system. Though she calls her work a nap ministry, Hersey encourages any of an array of ways of resting, of exiting the grind. These include simply closing your eyes for a few minutes, a silent, perhaps little longer than necessary morning shower, meditation for just 20 minutes each day, sipping a cup of warm tea, listening quietly to music that you find calming, not just as a background for busyness, but simply listening. Maybe even taking time to listen to a whole album. Taking a break from social media, which according to Hersey can be a kind of Sabbath. A meditative walk in nature. Playing a musical instrument. Laughing intensely is a break. Knitting, crocheting, or quilting. Praying or creating an altar of objects that are sacred to you. A long warm bath to which I would add some bubbles. And a time midday 20-minute actual nap. Dancing alone or with others. I would add to her list non-specific puttering in the garden or simply watching the birds, whether it's a feeder or hawks or vultures swirling overhead. Rest, Hersey reminds us, is the place from which dreams and imagination emerges. Imagination, the writer Bell Hooks asserts, is one of the most powerful modes of resistance that exploited and oppressed groups can do and use. Imaginative notions of resistance shared by womanists, writers, musicians, poets, and teachers can offer instructive examples to all of us. Listening to Black women's stories can aid all of us in our shared story, striving for liberation. Black women whose ancestors have sustained themselves in their communities, who survived and thrived in systems that objectified and oppressed them and their siblings, have done so for 400 years. 400 years. Such powerful teachers have much to offer to those of us who are simply trying to figure out how we're going to make it through the next 4 years. Closing one's eyes does not mean taking your eyes off the prize. It opens a pathway to dreaming and imagining how we might sometime arrive at the beloved community we long for. Back in August of 1963, when Reverend Dr. King stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, he was beginning to read from a prepared script when a wise Black woman, the singer Mahalia Jackson, called out, "Tell them about the dream, Martin. Tell them about the dream." He set aside his prepared script, and the words he shared, the dream he shared, has been instrumental in changing America's story. Such is the power of dreaming. Hersey also agrees with Dr. King and with our opening reading this morning that the church, and for them especially the Black church, which helped sustain their ancestors, was the place to begin a movement. In the church, this church that assures us that we are not struggling for justice on our own, but are members of a larger community. The religious community is essential. So let's breathe in and out together. Take a pause. Just for a moment, let go of your to-do list, opening space to let dreams seep in. Just for this moment, rest. Let go, too, my siblings, of fictitious stories that tells us that success is always about doing more. And seek to make quiet moments an expanding part of your daily practice. Strive rather to be more and dream more and imagine more. And then go forward rested and renewed to step by step seek and find the beloved community. May it be so. May we make it so.
Hi. My name is Sandy Lynn. I am an older-ish, large-ish size woman with very short white hair, and I'm wearing a dark teal-colored long-sleeve top that has little sparkly doodads on them, I don't know what they're called, and silver chalice earrings. I was asked to speak about the question, why do I show up to help? First, I'll give a little background. I moved here to Springfield just about a year ago from Eureka, California. Not Yreka, Eureka, which is on the coast, where I'd been very involved in the UU Church there for over 20 years. I had lived in I'd lived in this area as a student in the 70s, and when I retired from teaching math in Eureka, I decided to return to this wonderful place. I've been coming to church regularly since about last March. Coming to a new place where I know only a couple of people was indeed a challenge. It started out by joining the Unitarians, and then the choir, and then I volunteered to help with tech because it looks so cool, right? And from there, opportunities just kept popping up. And why do it? It takes time and energy, and it's not clear at first. It'll be too much for me. Or maybe there are weird people I'll have to work with, or maybe I won't be good at it, or et cetera, goes on in my head. But you know, so far it's been good. There are really great people here. When I come to a church service, it's like I inhale all the good stuff. A thought-provoking sermon that reminds me of all the great good values we hold dear. And even if I do not yet know everyone, and you do not know me, I can feel and see that I'm not alone here. It gets me out of the house on Sunday mornings, and there are yummy snacks. Helping out and getting involved is the exhale, what I can give back. And there are so many ways to choose from small little bits of a one-time thing to all the way to joining a committee or the board or some group that meets weekly all year and everything in between. Oh, and there's even more good stuff. There's the UU Share email forum, fun, with 2 U's, and birders groups, and I'm in a small group on Zoom. Hi, my small group. And tons of stuff you can find on the website, and tables in the hallway, and there's with all this good stuff I get from this place. How can I not give back? Somehow, in some way. It's as simple as that. Thank you.
You're with me on this one. We're doing this one together. Our closing words of benediction are from Margaret William Baxton. Once upon a time, I was. Now I am. Someday I will become.
Once there was, now there is. Soon there will be, and someday there surely shall be.
Once upon a time we were. Now we are.
And someday, hallelujah, we surely shall become.
Salam, shalom, amen, and blessed be.
Blessed be.
Please join us in our words for our chalice extinguishing. Flame, not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. For these we carry in our hearts until we are together again. I invite you now to just go ahead and return to your seat, and rather than rushing off to coffee, you might want to take a moment to pause and rest and let the music of our post-led Lud wash over you.